Elaine Matthews sat in her car in the parking lot, her hands resting on the steering wheel even though the engine had been off for almost an hour. She stared at the glass front of the building, where she had spent more than half of her life. The lights inside were bright, the lobby busy with people rushing in and out, just like any other day. For everyone else, it was business as usual. For her, it felt like the world had collapsed. Yesterday she had been told that her retirement send-off would be grand, a celebration of her 32 years of service. There would be speeches, photos, and recognition for the loyalty she had given without pause. She had pictured herself standing there, smiling, holding flowers, hearing her name spoken with respect. It was supposed to be the one moment where all the sacrifices made sense. But instead, the CEO, Richard, had stood before the staff that morning and announced that his niece, Claire, would be the new vice president. 28 years old, polished and smiling, as if the job had been hers all along. The same role Elaine had been promised. Not as a promotion, but as a final gesture of honor, a way to leave with dignity. Elaine remembered clapping with everyone else, her palms cold, her throat dry. She felt invisible as Richard's words filled the room. He praised Claire's fresh vision and bright future, while Elaine's own years of sweat, late nights, and lost weekends vanished like smoke. Nobody mentioned her. Nobody looked at her. Now, sitting in her car, she replayed the moment over and over, unable to breathe past the weight in her chest. She thought of the birthdays she had missed with her daughter, Maya. The dinners she skipped, the vacations she canceled. She thought of the nights she had stayed in the office until dawn, chasing deadlines that never seemed to end. Every memory of sacrifice rose up like a cruel joke. Her phone buzzed with messages, colleagues sending polite notes about Claire's promotion, reminders about the upcoming retirement event. She didn't open them. Her fingers trembled too much to type anyway. It wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal. She felt as though her entire life had been stolen in one announcement, rewritten to erase her from the story. She wasn't leaving with honor. She was being pushed out, discarded like she had never mattered at all. Through the windshield, she watched a young employee walk by, laughing, phone in hand. She wondered if anyone inside knew how broken she felt, or if, like Richard and Claire, they had already moved on, ready to forget her the moment she stepped out the door. Elaine pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, fighting tears. For the first time in decades, she didn't know where she belonged. All she had left was an empty parking spot and a company that no longer wanted her. Elaine had been only 24 when she first walked into the company's lobby. Back then, it was a smaller business, just a few floors in the same building that now towered over the city. She remembered the nerves, the way her hands shook as she filled out the receptionist form. She wanted stability, a steady paycheck, something that would last longer than the small jobs she had been doing after college. What she didn't know then was that this place would become her whole life. At first, she answered phones, scheduled meetings, and made coffee runs. She told herself it was temporary, that she would find something better. But she was good at her job. She stayed late, took extra shifts, and quickly learned how everything worked. Managers noticed. Promotions came slowly, but they came, each one pulling her deeper into the company's world. By her 30s, she was managing whole teams. By her 40s, she was the senior operations manager, the one everyone turned to when problems needed solving. Her dedication became her identity. She was the dependable one, the person who never said no. She stayed through late nights when systems crashed. She gave up weekends when clients needed attention. She even worked through the flu, her head pounding, just to prove she wouldn't let anyone down. But the cost followed her home. Elaine had married young, to a kind man named Robert. At first, he supported her long hours. He told her she was ambitious, that he admired her drive. But as the years went on, the dinners grew cold, the arguments louder. Robert wanted a wife who came home before midnight, who would sit on the couch with him and talk about dreams beyond the office. Elaine always said, just a little longer, just until the next promotion. By the time she reached her mid-30s, the marriage had unraveled. Robert left, saying he couldn't compete with her job anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was losing time with Maya, their daughter. Elaine promised herself that she would make it up to her. But one missed birthday became 3. One forgotten school play turned into a habit. Maya grew up watching her mother pack briefcases instead of lunchboxes. Even when Elaine was home, she was half distracted, her phone buzzing, her mind racing with deadline. Now Maya was 30, independent and strong-willed. Their relationship was fragile at best. Conversations often ended in silence or anger. Maya carried years of resentment, and Elaine carried years of guilt. She wanted to bridge the gap, but she didn't know how. In the present, Elaine's life was quiet but empty. She lived alone in a small condo, her walls lined with framed certificates, employee awards, and company photos. No family portraits, no laughter in the halls. She kept her work laptop open on the kitchen table even on weekends, as if it anchored her to something real. Without her job, she wasn't sure who she was. The company itself had changed over the decade. It still called itself family-owned, and Richard, the CEO, loved to repeat that phrase at every gathering. But Elaine knew the truth. It wasn't about family. It was about loyalty to him, to his name. Nepotism was as natural as breathing in that. Promotions went to relatives, not to the people who worked the hardest. Everyone whispered about it, but no one dared speak aloud. Richard had power, and he rewarded obedience, not effort. Elaine had survived because she didn't fight back. She obeyed, she adapted, she proved her worth again and again. But the promise of the vice president role had been her one piece of proof that it had all mattered. It wasn't about money or title. It was about recognition, a symbolic farewell that said her years counted. Now, with that promise gone, she felt stripped bare. Her marriage was gone, her daughter distant, her health fragile after too many sleepless nights. If the company could erase her so easily, what did she have left? No legacy, no home life, no family waiting. Only memories of late nights and a plaque or two gathering dust. Elaine sat in her condo most evenings, staring at her empty living room. The silence pressed in on her, and she wondered if she had traded too much for too little. All she had wanted was to matter, to leave behind something that said she wasn't invisible. And now even that had been taken away. The rehearsal for the retirement party was supposed to be a small, cheerful meeting. Elaine had been asked to join the planning committee weeks earlier, and even though she felt tired, she agreed. She thought it would be her chance to see how they were honoring her, to feel some appreciation before the final day. The conference room was decorated with sample flowers and mock-up posters. Caterers were coming in and out with trays, and a young assistant tested the microphone. Elaine stood near the back, smiling politely, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. She already knew the vice president role had been given to Claire, but she still hoped that the party would at least give her some dignity. She stepped out for a moment to grab water from the hallway. That was when she heard Claire's voice from around the corner. Bright, sharp, careless. She's old, bitter, and stuck in the past, Claire said, her laughter cutting through Elaine's chest. Uncle only kept her around because she never left. Honestly, she should be grateful we're even giving her a party at all. There was a pause, and then came Richard's laugh. The deep, easy laugh she had once thought meant warmth. It wasn't warmth now. It was agreement. Elaine froze. For a second, she wondered if she had misheard. But the words echoed in her mind, each one slicing deeper. Old. Bitter. Stuck in the past. She had spent 32 years proving her worth. And that was how they saw her? Just a relic who stayed too long? Her hands shook as she placed the cup of water back on the table. She wanted to walk in, to confront them, to scream. But her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she returned to the rehearsal room, her face pale, her chest tight. Nobody noticed the change in her expression. They kept talking about seating charts and music, as if nothing had happened. After 10 minutes, she couldn't take it anymore. She stood up abruptly. "I'm sorry," she said to the group. "I can't be part of this anymore." Her tone was sharper than usual, and some heads turned in surprise. She didn't explain. She just picked up her bag and walked out. In the hallway, she expected someone to follow her, to ask what was wrong. No one did. The silence was louder than any words. Later that evening, she checked her email out of habit. The party planning messages were still being sent, but her name was no longer included in the threads. She searched through the scheduled drafts, her heart pounding faster with each scroll. Her speech was gone. The slideshow of her career highlights had been removed. Her name wasn't even listed on the final program. They had erased her, completely. Elaine sat at her kitchen table, staring at the glow of the computer screen. The world around her seemed to fade into a blur. 32 years of service, gone with a few clicks of a mouse. She thought about all the nights she had walked into that same building when the city was asleep, lights burning only on her floor. She thought about the Christmas Eve when she had eaten takeout at her desk while her daughter waited at home. She thought about the anniversaries, the birthdays, the ordinary evenings she had given up in the name of loyalty. And for what? So she could be mocked by a 28-year-old who barely knew the struggle of the company's early years? So the man she had trusted, defended, and followed for decades could laugh at her expense? The betrayal wasn't just professional. It was personal. She had believed she was part of something bigger, that she belonged to this family. But families don't erase you. Families don't laugh behind your back when you're not in the room. Elaine closed the laptop, but the emptiness stayed. Her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain. It was more than sadness. It was the sharp, cutting realization that she didn't matter at all. Not to them. Not after everything. For the first time, she wondered if she had wasted her life. The nights after the rehearsal stretched on like endless shadows. Elaine lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her thoughts chasing each other in circles. Sleep never came easily. When she did drift off, she woke again within an hour, her heart pounding, her mouth dry. She would walk through the quiet condo, opening cupboards, pouring herself glasses of water she barely touched. The silence pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. She thought about Richard's laugh, about Claire's words, about her name being erased. The anger burned, but so did the regret. She wondered if she should have left years ago, before everything was taken from her. She wondered if her daughter had been right all along. Finally, after a week of restless nights, Elaine called Maya. She rehearsed what to say as the phone rang, telling herself she would keep it calm, that she just wanted to talk. When Maya answered, her voice was cool, cautious. "Hi, Mom," Maya said. "Hi," Elaine replied, trying to sound steady. "I was wondering if we could meet. Maybe dinner?" There was a pause on the other end. "Dinner? What's going on?" "Nothing. I want to see you. I know I haven't always been there, but..." Maya cut her off. "You haven't been there at all." Elaine swallowed hard. "I know. And I'm sorry. I just want to try. Please." They agreed to meet at a small diner near Maya's apartment. Elaine arrived early, hands shaking as she stirred her coffee. When Maya walked in, she looked tired but strong, her dark hair tied back, her expression unreadable. For a few minutes, they made small talk. Work, weather, the basics. But Elaine couldn't hold it back any longer. "Maya, I wanted to tell you what happened at the company." Maya sighed, leaning back in her seat. "I heard. Someone posted about Claire's promotion on LinkedIn." Elaine's voice trembled. "They promised me that position. It was supposed to be my farewell. And now, it's like I never mattered." Maya's eyes hardened. "You're surprised? Mom, you gave them everything. You gave them me. You chose them over me for decades. And now they've thrown you away. That's what happens." The words cut deep, sharper than Claire's mocking laughter. Elaine reached across the table, but Maya pulled her hand back. "I was a kid," Maya said, her voice rising. "I waited for you on every birthday, every holiday, hoping you'd come home. But you never did. And now you want sympathy because they treated you the same way you treated me." Elaine's throat closed. Tears burned her eyes, but she held them back. "Maya, please. I know I failed you, but I'm trying." "You're too late," Maya said, standing up. "You can't just come back now because you're lonely. I built my life without you." Elaine sat frozen as Maya walked out of the diner. Her coffee had gone cold, but she stayed there for nearly an hour, staring at the door as if her daughter might return. She didn't. Back at work, things grew worse. People who once chatted with her in the hallways now avoided eye contact. Emails that used to come to her desk were rerouted. Meetings were suddenly rescheduled without her. When she walked into the cafeteria, conversations hushed. The message was clear. Richard and Claire were in charge now, and anyone seen too close to Elaine could risk their own standing. One afternoon, Elaine overheard two younger colleagues whispering near the copy machine. "She's not going to last," one said. "Richard's niece is taking over everything. Better to stay on her side." Elaine walked away before they saw her. Each day, her office felt smaller, colder, like a cage closing in. The thought of legal action crossed her mind more than once. She researched wrongful termination, workplace discrimination, retaliation. But when she called an old friend who practiced law, his voice was hesitant. "Elaine, listen. They've got money. They've got lawyers who eat these cases alive. It would drain you before you saw a dime." "So I just do nothing?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm saying be careful. They'll bury you if you try." The weight of helplessness pressed down harder. The company had taken her pride, her dignity, and now even the hope of justice seemed out of reach. One night, after everyone had gone home, Elaine stayed behind. She wandered the quiet halls, thinking about all the years she had walked them with purpose. She wanted to sit at her desk one last time, to feel like it still belonged to her. But when she pushed open the office door, she froze. Claire was there, lounging in Elaine's chair, her high heels propped up on the desk. Papers were scattered around as if they already belonged to her. She twirled a pen between her fingers and smirked when she saw Elaine. "Oh, Auntie Elaine," Claire said mockingly, though they weren't related. "Don't worry. I'll take care of your little projects. You can rest now." Elaine's chest tightened. "This is my office," she whispered. Claire shrugged. "Not anymore. Uncle says I should start settling in. You don't mind, do you?" Elaine's knees weakened. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. She wanted to scream, to throw Claire out, to reclaim the space that had been hers for so long. But the words wouldn't come. Claire only smiled wider, tapping her heel against the desk as if to mark her territory. Something inside Elaine broke. She turned and walked out, her eyes blurred with tears. By the time she reached the elevator, her body shook uncontrollably. She pressed the button again and again, desperate to escape. For the first time in 32 years, she realized she had no power left at all. Not in the company, not in her family, not even in her own life. She was a shadow, fading, forgotten, with nothing to hold on to. The day of the retirement event arrived, and Elaine walked into the grand ballroom with a heavy heart. The room was decorated with banners and golden balloons. A large stage stood at the front, with a podium and bright spotlight. Round tables filled the hall, covered in white cloth and polished glasses. It should have been her night. But the moment she saw Claire standing beside Richard, smiling and radiant, Elaine knew it wasn't. Guests clapped and laughed, music played softly, and waiters carried trays of champagne. Elaine sat at a table near the front, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her name tag was small, almost hidden. Across the room, Claire's name was on every screen, displayed under the words, "The future of the company." The program began with speeches about the company's growth, its bright new leadership, and its commitment to innovation. Richard spoke warmly about his niece, praising her vision and energy. The applause was loud, thunderous. Then came Elaine's turn. A young assistant walked on stage carrying a thin plaque, the kind sold in bulk for generic ceremony. Elaine's name was printed on it in small letters. No slideshow, no photos of her career, no memories shared, just a plaque. Richard smiled politely. "We'd like to thank Elaine for her years of service. 32 years, if I recall. Truly admirable." The audience clapped briefly, more out of courtesy than emotion. Richard gestured for her to come forward. Elaine stood, legs stiff, and walked slowly to the stage. She took the plaque, her face pale. Richard leaned toward her and whispered, "Just say a few words. Keep it short." Elaine turned to the microphone. Her heart pounded. She looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues, clients, staff she had mentored over the years. For a moment, she considered keeping it brief, as Richard had asked. She could smile, thank them, and walk away quietly. But something inside her shifted. A clarity she hadn't felt in years filled her chest. She realized this was her last chance. Not to beg, not to please, but to finally tell the truth. She took a deep breath. "Thank you for this plaque," she began, her voice steady but cold. "I thought tonight would be about celebrating 32 years of loyalty, of sacrifice. But instead, it feels like I've been erased." The room grew quiet. People shifted in their seats, surprised by her tone. Richard frowned from the side of the stage. Elaine continued, her voice stronger now. "I want to remind you all of what 32 years looked like. It was working Christmas Eve while my daughter sat at home alone. It was sleeping under my desk during system crashes, unpaid and unseen. It was choosing this company again and again, even when it cost me my marriage, my health, my family." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some pulled out their phones. A few began recording. "And what did that loyalty earn me?" Elaine asked, her eyes scanning the crowd. Silence. Laughter behind my back. Being replaced by someone with the right last name. Nepotism dressed up as vision. A company that calls itself a family but treats people like disposable tools. Gasps filled the room. Richard stepped forward, his hand half raised as if to stop her, but she didn't step aside. "You all know it's true," Elaine said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've worked the unpaid hours. You've missed your children's birthday. You've kept quiet, afraid of losing your jobs. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. I gave my life to this company, and tonight, they want to send me off with a plaque and a pat on the head while they crown the CEO's niece. That isn't honor. That's hypocrisy." A heavy silence hung in the air. The staff at the tables stared, wide-eyed, some nodding subtly, others recording every word. Elaine stepped back from the microphone, her breathing ragged. She had said what she came to say. For a moment, the room was frozen. Then Richard forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. "Well, that was unexpected. Let's move on, shall we?" But it was too late. The damage was done. By the end of the night, the videos had spread online. Clips of Elaine's speech were shared across social media, accompanied by hashtags calling out corruption and favoritism. Employees who had stayed silent for years began to comment, adding their own stories of mistreatment and sacrifice. Customers, too, voiced outrage, vowing to boycott the company. The company's proud image as a family-owned business cracked in a matter of hours. What was meant to be a smooth celebration turned into a scandal. Elaine sat in her car afterward, the same spot where she had cried weeks earlier. But this time, she didn't feel erased. She didn't feel invisible. For the first time in decades, she felt heard. She didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. The truth was out, and it was bigger than Richard or Claire. She had no power left inside the company, but outside, she had something they couldn't take away. Her voice. And now the world was listening. Elaine woke the next morning to find her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages, emails, news alerts, all filled with her name. The video of her speech had spread like wildfire. Journalists wanted interviews. Strangers sent her messages of support, thanking her for saying what so many were afraid to. Former employees of the company came forward, sharing their own stories of unpaid overtime and broken promises. For the first time in years, Elaine didn't feel alone. She didn't get the vice president seat back, of course. But as the headlines grew louder, she realized she didn't want it anymore. That office, that title, meant nothing compared to the respect she had finally gained. The one thing the company could never give her, dignity, she had taken back for herself. Encouraged by friends and lawyers who now offered their help for free, Elaine filed a lawsuit. It wasn't just about her treatment at the retirement event. It was about decades of exploitation, the unpaid overtime, the retaliation, the toxic culture that crushed anyone who wasn't part of Richard's inner circle. To her surprise, dozens of employees stepped forward, willing to testify. They had seen what happened to her and decided they wouldn't stay silent anymore. The board of directors couldn't ignore the firestorm. Shareholders demanded answers, customers threatened boycotts, and media outlets ran story after story about the scandal. Richard tried to laugh it off at first, calling it disgruntled bitterness. But the pressure grew heavier every day. Eventually, the board announced that Claire's promotion would be under review, pending an internal investigation. For Elaine, it was more than enough. She didn't need to sit in that corner office to prove her worth. Watching Richard squirm under the weight of his own lies was satisfaction enough. In the middle of the chaos, she reached out to Maya again. This time, her voice was softer, humbler. "Maya," she said over the phone, "I know I hurt you. I can't change the years I missed. But I need you to know I see it now. I see what I gave up. And I'm sorry." There was a long silence on the line. Then Maya spoke, her voice quiet. "I saw your speech, Mom. For the first time, I saw you fight for something other than that. You fought for yourself. And maybe that means you can fight for us too." Tears blurred Elaine's vision. "I want to. If you'll let me." Slowly, the walls between them began to crack. They started meeting once a week for coffee, then dinners. Conversations that once ended in anger now stretched into hours of laughter and stories. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Elaine, it was more precious than any title she could have held. With time, Elaine began building something new. Small businesses and startups reached out to her, asking for guidance. They wanted to know how to build workplaces that didn't fall into the same toxic traps she had endured. She agreed to consult, sharing her knowledge not just about operations but about culture, fairness, and respect. Her work was different now. She set her own hours, chose her own clients, and never missed an evening with Maya. The money was enough, but the freedom was priceless. She no longer belonged to a company that discarded her. She belonged to herself. Elaine had spent 32 years thinking her worth came from loyalty to others. Now she understood it came from loyalty to herself. She had been broken, humiliated, and cast aside, but she had risen stronger. She didn't need Richard's approval, Claire's title, or anyone's applause. She had her voice. She had her daughter. She had her life back. And this time, she would not give it away. The cafe was small and warm, tucked on the corner of a quiet street. Elaine sat across from Maya, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of her. For the first time in years, she wasn't checking her phone, wasn't distracted by thoughts of deadlines or email. She was just there with her daughter. Maya had been telling a funny story about a coworker, and Elaine found herself laughing, really laughing, until her chest hurt. It felt strange at first, the sound of her own joy, but soon it came easier, lighter. She realized she couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like this with Maya. Maybe not since Maya was a little girl. The air between them felt different now. Softer. No longer heavy with unspoken anger. They still had scars, but something new was growing in their place. Elaine glanced out the window, watching the people pass by, and then back at Maya. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "You know," she said, "for a while, I thought my life ended when they erased me, when they took everything I worked for. But maybe this is where it truly begins." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Her eyes were steady, kind. "Then promise me something, Mom. This time, don't choose work. Choose us." Elaine's throat tightened. She nodded slowly, unable to speak for a moment. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from relief. For the first time, she wasn't carrying the weight of regret alone. She squeezed Maya's hand back, her smile trembling but real. At last she felt it, freedom, wholeness, a life that still had meaning. And this time, she wouldn't let it slip away. Hey besties. Thanks for staying with me till the end of Elaine's story. Imagine giving 32 years of your life to a company, only to be replaced by the CEO's niece a day before retirement. Heartbreaking, right? But Elaine found her strength, spoke her truth, and rebuilt her life on her own terms. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. See you next time.